Welcome back. Even after the top U.S. security officials issued a harsh warning last week that Russia is trying to interfere again in the midterms, the president kept up his attacks on what he calls the Russian hoax. Here's what Republican Senator Roy Blunt and Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar told Chuck yesterday on Meet the Press.
The central thread of the fabric of democracy is people having confidence that what happened on Election Day is what really happened. Another discussion about all the information that may have led voters to that decision, that's where the Russians appear to be more vigorous even this time than they were last time.
How confident are you that the 2018 midterm elections are going to be legitimate?
I'm very concerned that you could have a hack that finally went through.
Joining me now is Jeh Johnson, former Homeland Security Secretary under President Obama. Secretary, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you the same question that Chuck asked Senator Klobuchar. Are you confident that our 2018 elections are going to go off unmeddled with, unattacked?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you a little bit, Katie, because there are very few absolutes in national security and in Homeland Security. I agree, and I haven't read an intelligence report in 18 months since I left office, but I agree instinctively with what we heard last week from the 5 national security officials that there has been a considerable amount of work done by state election officials when it comes to election infrastructure cybersecurity, and that the larger threat we need to be concerned about, which is apparently ongoing, is disinformation, misinformation, extreme views published and republished by foreign powers, with a foreign influence. And I don't have confidence at all that we have our arms around that we understand the full extent of it. I think we're still understanding the full extent of that campaign from 2016.
How do we get our arms around that? Because they're very clearly exploiting a tenet of American democracy, which is the sharing of ideas, free speech. How do you combat against that?
Our strength is our weakness, isn't it? We are vulnerable to fake news. We are vulnerable to people publishing and republishing extreme views because the information highway now is essentially unregulated. Virtually anyone with a keyboard can get access to it, and there are very few barriers to entry or barriers to exit. And so I happen to believe that when it comes to regulating speech, political debate, government and security agencies of our government have to be hesitant to intervene.
So is this the responsibility of the social media companies?
I think to a very large extent it is the responsibility of social media providers, internet service providers to insist on attribution and monitor and regulate things that go out to the American public.
Still, 21 states had their election systems hacked into. Are you confident that those systems are still secure, that there wasn't information that was stolen that will now be used against those systems in 2018?
No, I can't. Of course, I can't be confident of that. That was a big concern of ours in 2016, which is why I issued so many public statements warning of this threat and why we encourage state election officials to work with us. Apparently, there's been considerable work done over the last year or so. We're now in the midst of that election campaign. So I think we are better than we were, but there are still vulnerabilities, very definitely. And there are a number of best practices out there that state election officials should be adhering to the full extent possible. Keep ballot counting and vote counting and tabulation off the internet and have redundancies over and over
ballots
again.
As well.
Whether it's a paper ballot or some other system of redundancy, the ability, in case a system fails, to have a backup, to have an accounting of votes. There are a number of best practices, and there are organizations like Center for American Progress that have done a lot of good work on this.
Would it made a material difference if the president was standing next to his intelligence chiefs last Thursday?
That's a good question. I would say that inevitably, when the president says it, people listen more. Now, the next question you're going to ask me is, why didn't President Obama say something in 2016? And the question the circumstances in 2016, I think, were very different because we were in the midst of a presidential election campaign, and we were concerned then that by injecting the president into that debate would have created a whole different dynamic. But very definitely, I think the American public needs to hear from President Trump that this is something that we should take seriously, and this is what we are doing about it specifically.
Let's talk about an article that came out in The Atlantic. I think it was just today. It's arguing that President Trump has radicalized ICE. You had jurisdiction over ICE for many years as the Director of Homeland Security. What has changed under this administration with that particular branch?
Well, a lot's changed. As that article notes, in the last several years of the Obama administration, when I was secretary, we gave ICE very specific guidance about what our priorities should be for people who are deported, to focus on the criminals, to focus on threats to public safety, MS-13, for example. And they did that. They actually did that. So the number of deportations went down, but the percentage of those deported who were convicted criminals went up. And little known fact, morale within ICE, my last year in office, went up a whole 7 percentage points according to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, because they did what we asked them to do, which is focus, like law enforcement officers, on public safety.
So then why did the union for ICE workers endorse the president, and why are we hearing from folks at ICE, including the head of ICE, Thomas Homan, say things like Donald Trump took the handcuffs off ICE?
Well, you'd have to ask Tom that question. I know that Tom Homan and I worked together very effectively, and essentially, enforcement and removal ops, these are law enforcement personnel, and we asked them to function as law enforcement personnel, and they did that. And I don't know whether there's a strict correlation, but morale definitely went up in ICE my last year in office, because these are officers dedicated to public safety, and with the limited resources Congress gives them, there's only so much they can do. So I continue to believe that their focus needs to be on public safety, working with the so-called sanctuary cities. And we made a lot of progress in tearing down those walls so that we could do that. And unfortunately, everyone's gone to their neutral corner.
There's a movement to abolish ICE. It's been painted as a racist agency, an agency that is doing more harm than good. It doesn't have a good approval ratings from progressives, obviously, with the abolish ICE movement. You've argued that they shouldn't abolish ICE, but there should be a change in leadership, and there should be a change in the functionality or the direction of ICE. Isn't that essentially the same thing?
No. Abolishing the agency is not the same thing as giving them a whole different policy direction.
I mean, that's doing everything but changing the name.
I would disagree. There are a lot of people who objected to the Vietnam War in the 60s, but very few people said we should abolish the Department of Defense and try to reconfigure it in some other way. ICE is removal operations, but it's also Homeland Security. It investigates crime having to do with customs and the border, counterfeit currency, child pornography. They do a lot of very, very important things. I just believe that the focus needs to be in a certain direction for the benefit of public safety. Don't just go after the low-hanging fruit.
And I do want to get you on the record in terms of the president and race. Over the weekend, he tweeted about LeBron James and Don Lemon over at CNN, called them dumb. There are folks out there who point to that and say this is proof that the president, if he's not a racist and has racist thoughts, there are folks that are saying that today. What's your take on this?
I am hesitant to brand somebody a racist or to call something racism. Me personally, that's not my style. I wish that we could, instead of focusing on that tweet and that exchange, focus on the positive aspects of what LeBron James was actually trying to do, which was, this is a successful professional athlete who wants to give back to his community and open a school. That effort has been drowned out by this whole debate about this one tweet from the President of the United States. I'd rather see us focus on someone who is a successful professional athlete who wants to give back to his community and all the good things he's trying to accomplish.
So why is the president not focusing on that?
Well, I wish he would. And I wish he would recognize some of the good things that LeBron James and others are trying to accomplish, rather than focus on one comment that apparently was made in the course of that interview.
Jay Johnson, wish we had the whole hour to talk, my friend. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming
Katie.
on. We appreciate it.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.